Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frankly Leader podcast. And this is season 2, and we are now into the bonus episodes. And I am thrilled to have my new good friend, all-round good egg, master YouTuber. I'm gonna officially introduce you in a second, but the wonderful Mark Gilroy. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I hope that egg comment's not a comment on the shape of my head these days. Because I used to have a lot more hair than this, you know. It was a lot less egg-like.
It's a good egg. I like that saying. They're a good egg. It just seems to do the Ron Seal of everybody knows what it means.
Oh,
And you are
that's
a
really
good egg.
kind of you. Thank
You
you.
do not have an egg-shaped head. So for those people that don't know Mark, let me introduce him more properly. Mark Gilroy is an organisational behaviour expert, executive coach and visual storyteller. I love that. He has over 20 years in L&D. He now helps leaders and teams work smarter, whether through engaging leadership programmes, productivity advice, or, drum roll, no-nonsense tech reviews. So you've got a fantastic YouTube channel as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird extra life that I have, but yeah, it's a fun one.
It's fun. And for people who don't know and they want to check you out on YouTube for some tech reviews and smart working, what's your YouTube channel called?
It's just my name, so it's that Mark Gilroy. Look for hats. I wear lots of hats in my videos.
That's maybe why today the egg shape thing came into our conversation.
And occasionally wigs. I've got a little collection of wigs as well that I sometimes
You
put
never
on.
have. Well, without further ado, we're going to dive in because we're talking about a really important topic today, one that you and I are hearing coming up a lot in our conversations with clients and other people in our network, and largely reflects the state of the world that we're currently living in at the moment. But before we get into that, for people who want to know a little bit more about you in your own words, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, and particularly what is it that you love about what you do?
Yeah, I don't know if you find this, Jennifer, this thing of where people ask you this, particularly people who aren't in your industry, and you have to kind of try and put all of it into a little box and that's clearly labelled. The one that I most often go with, which covers a lot of my work, is I'm a professional geek. I get really, really interested and excited and fascinated by particular little things. And I like to share that enthusiasm and excitement with other people. So whether that could be psychology or coaching or leadership or tech, productivity, I get really geeky about a lot of things. And I'm really passionate about sharing some of those things with other people.
I love that. And I can echo it. I was just thinking my version of that was I need to try and I'm a professional container of my geekiness, trying not to over geek about things. Brilliant.
Yeah, there's that transition from geekiness to nerdiness that you don't want to cross that boundary unless you can help it, where you start losing people. But I think it's okay to be geeky.
I think it's really okay to be geeky if that's authentic. Authenticity rules, after all.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this hot topic, and we're going to walk our way into that. But let's start with the context. So, what's the biggest challenge that you see of our future that leaders need to be most prepared for, that this tool is going to help them with?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In your introduction, your very kind introduction, by the way, you talked about 20 years in the industry, and it kind of stopped me there. I was thinking, gosh, has it really been 20 years? It's been more than 20 years, actually. 25 years-ish in the learning and development world, which is a long time. And it's long enough that I've also developed a degree of cynicism. I think as I've lost my hair, I've kind of grown cynicism elsewhere. And that means that I've often seen these things kind of come in cycles. There's waves that come in our industry, whether that's about kind of boom and bust and there being lots of work on and no work, or whether it's about certain trends and words coming around again, or certain models and frameworks coming in and out of fashion. But the one thing that just keeps on rolling and people are very passionate about talking about is change. And it's certainly something I'm hearing an awful lot about. We're at this really interesting point in time, I think, where we've got this intersection of lots of really world-shaping changes happening, whether that's kind of the social economic status and the cost of living crisis, whether it's about climate, whether it's about the political shifts that are going on in lots of parts of the world. And I think they're all kind of coming together to produce a huge wave of change that a lot of people are really feeling deep down, and there aren't that many kind of tools, frameworks, pieces of research that are designed to understand that level of change.
Mm. Yeah. And you and I have a webinar that we run about coaching for leaders. And one of the things that we talk about in there is the fact that we are no longer in a VUCA world, are we? That we have moved to another acronym, which I will let you explain for the listeners.
Yeah, so one of the ones we talk about, I think VUCA's been around for ages, right? It
Forever.
was for
Yeah.
kind of US Army generals started talking about it. And it was really helpful up to a point to describe the types of change that we experience and also the different sort of fragments of change that go on. But after a while, particularly post-pandemic, I would argue a bit further back than that, kind of looking at things like Brexit, global financial crash, that type of thing. Again, I've been around a while, and I've seen all of that go on
Cycle.
again and again. Those cycles. There was a different acronym proposed by a futurologist called BANI, BANI, and that acronym is Brittle, Anxious, Non-Linear, and Incomprehensible. And I think although a lot of those words are quite emotive and high on impact, actually they do describe a lot of what's going on in society at the moment, whether that's your kind of your professional life or just life in general.
Yeah. What I like about the BANI compared to VUCA is the emotional side of things, because I think VUCA is more outward looking and I think BANI takes it more inward looking. And what we're talking about here is the psychology of change. So to take people on a change journey with you in an organisational setting, you have to understand how change impacts people on an individual level. And I think the BANI model starts to turn the lens inwards more than what VUCA maybe did for us as organisations. It kept us like externally systems looking rather than actually what's impact here and how do we use that information, understand what's going on. From a leadership perspective, as a leader, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And how can I adapt myself in order to work with this change and get people on a journey with me? Are there some tools that I can pick up and I can start to feel more resourceful?
I love that frame. I hadn't thought about it in that way, that it is more personal and more inward looking, but you're absolutely right. I think thinking about some of those terms like, anxious and incomprehensible, it's about why am I feeling this? Why is this coming up for me? And that's probably a far more helpful way of processing the change than thinking about the system or the process that's driving it. I really like that. And I guess change is always personal, isn't it? It's always going to be about how your mental map of how the world works and your place within it has been shifted. Now, sometimes it's a very gentle shift or a little gentle push, and sometimes it's a shake, and your foundations are rattled by something that's gone on that you thought was set in stone and was very much kind of a rule of how the world works. We're seeing a lot of that being rattled at the moment, and I
Yeah.
think people really are looking for some ways to process that and understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think leaders need to be skilled at? What skills do you think are important to them?
Yeah, well, I think I'd like to just build on what you were talking about there in terms of being inward looking. And what I'm not talking about navel gazing here, right? Because that can go on forever and ever and not be that helpful, particularly in some professions. But I think looking for some self-reflection and thinking about what's going on for you in terms of your preferences, your biases, the way that you direct your attention and your focus can help inform not only how you're likely to talk about things like change, but also how other people are likely to see you talking about change. So it's almost like a paradox that when you spend some time looking inward at the self and developing yourself, developing your understanding of self, that you actually help everybody around you, because you're able to give them a more profound and more informed experience of what's actually going on.
Yeah. I love that, because I think that for most people managing and leading, their natural instinct is, what fire do I need to put out there? Who
Oh
needs
yeah.
my help? And the focus is on putting everybody else first. So I can't tell you how many times, particularly in coaching context, I use the metaphor, put your oxygen mask on first. This podcast is specifically aimed at resourcing leaders. So we're really looking at it through the lens of leaders. Tell us a bit more about the resource in terms of, not just the broader things in the toolkit, but navigating behaviour change, the psychology of change. What do leaders really need to know about that?
Yeah, one of the things I really wanted to share with your listeners was around the psychology of change, and particularly the psychology of bias. This has many different labels. So if you Google this, you'll find things like attentional bias. Unconscious bias was a really trendy label a few years ago. Psychological bias, cognitive bias, it's all the same thing, right? There's an amazing visual, which I would urge you to look up, called the Cognitive Bias Codex. It's by, I want to say, UNC School of Government, but it's this beautiful image which covers and tries to map out all the different types of psychological biases there are. And even just looking at that image, you will see a fundamental truth, which is that regardless of how self-aware we think we are, actually, we're not, because there's all sorts of weird stuff going on. So I've got a couple of experiments I wanted to share with you that your listeners can free to run with their friends and their colleagues, just to help sort of demonstrate some of this. So the first one would be, if you close one of your eyes, doesn't matter which one, you should be able to see your nose. And if you close your other eye, you can see it. It's really clear, actually, in my case.
Does it depend how big your nose is?
It definitely depends how big your nose is and what shape it is. But you should be able to see it quite clearly. But if you open both eyes, it's not there. It
not without going both-eyed.
Yeah. So it's weird, right? It's there, but it's not there. And your brain knows it's there and you can reach it and touch it. But if you open your eyes, you can never see it, both eyes. It's only there if you just sort of reduce your stimulus to one eye. And this is a great example of a very well-researched area, which is how much information your brain can handle. So if you had to put a number on how many pieces of information your brain can process a second, what would be your best guess, Jennifer?
It's a lot of gigabits per second.
A lot.
It's a lot,
of gigabits.
It's about 56, isn't it? Well, it used to be 56, and then I think they researched and said with our overwhelmed world that we're living in, it's now a lot more, something like 128 gigabits or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. So there's a difference between what it can handle, what it can process, versus what it can make sense of. Two very different answers. So in terms of what it can process and the information that it receives, it varies, but it's somewhere around 11 million bits of information per second.
That's a lot
from all of our different senses, which is like it's an incomprehensible amount of information. But it can only handle and make sense of about 40 to 50 bits. And this is just a perfect example of that. Like once your brain knows your nose is there, it just edits it out. It's this massive editing job is going on all the time. And it happens a lot. Kind of Daniel Kahneman calls these heuristics, where your brain takes these shortcuts to try and look for patterns, look for trends, look for things that it thinks should be there, and it often fills it in, or it just assumes that it is there and then moves on to the next different thing. I don't know if you can think of any other examples of when this kind of comes up. Well, it's making me think.
When I think of this topic, I think of the neuro-linguistic programming model, where we take information in through our senses and we run it through our filter system. So for me, the thing that I find really interesting is how do we make sense of the information that we decide to take on board and process through that filter system. And that thing that you just spoke to about, like, some information we just ignore because, like, I know my nose is here. I know there's nothing I need to pay attention to about my nose. It's not, like, in this conversation, the nose is not the thing that's important. My attention on you is, I'm thinking about the background. I'm thinking about the podcast. I'm thinking about the content. But that thing of how do we make sense of the world in the context of bias, the stories that we believe about what things mean and what they don't mean have such an impact on then how we respond outwardly into the world. And I love that part of this topic. I think there's some real juice for us in terms of self-awareness, but really change, like knowing that there are choice points in all that process of data processing that's happening. Like we've got a lot more freedom and authority and responsibility than I think we believe we have to make choices and different choices.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it does happen all the time. If I was to show you a picture of an animal, and before I showed you that picture, I asked the question, how many legs does this elephant have? You already know what the answer is. Even if that elephant ends up having 2 legs, you've already filled in the fact that it should have 4 legs and a trunk and it's grey. Because of those shortcuts that we've been taught to take over time, and they help us process that like in crazy amount of information. It also means that we often lose access to information. So we're talking about kind of synaptic connections here, neurons, and as a lot of people who are listening to the podcast will know, we have neurons everywhere. They are obviously in our brain, in our spinal cord, in our nervous system, but we have quite a concentration of them in our gut. So when people talk about having a gut feeling about something, we're talking about a real physical thing that's happening. It's not kind of out there in the ether. This is a real signal that our body is sending to our brain. Sometimes it's something quite simple, like I am full or I am hungry, but you'll know you get those feelings about all sorts of things, and they feel like they're centered around that part of your body, and it's real. So your brain has to make sense of that and go, oh, I had this feeling before when that person said something or when this thing happened. This feels like the same feeling, and we sometimes don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, and that's making me think vagus nerve. So I'm now thinking like one of the myths in this space is that the brain is king, and actually that everything's top down, very hierarchical, like old school leadership model, that the brain is king and everything goes top down. And yet we know from the vagus nerve, which runs through the spinal cord, from the brain through the heart into the gut and then back up again, that it's two-way communication, that we flow up and we flow down. So information is being processed up and down all the time. So we take information from the gut, from the heart into the brain, and then back out again. And I think that particularly for me is where when we're looking at the future and the change and the level of uncertainty and incomprehensibility, and we're facing things that we've never had to face before. So climate change is the one I always come to. I'm like, we don't have a library of books that we can go to and pick some science or history books that tell us how to navigate it. We're navigating it for the first time, which is both terrifying and exhilarating and everything in between. And so we can't just rely on data. Like we've got to start to bring in some of those other wisdoms in our bodies, like sensing, intuition, gut feel. And then how do we use that to make sense and inform us about what's safe to step into, what's the right thing to step into? I think that's quite an interesting thing for the future of leadership.
Yeah, and in doing that, we're going to have to combat a bunch of other cognitive biases which are around short-term thinking. So the same short-term thinking that is probably likely to make you think, actually, I'm not going to save for 10 years, 20 years, 40 years time, put money in my pension because I can't imagine myself into that future, is the same bias that is likely to stop you thinking about climate change all of the time, because statistically, it is likely to affect other people in the world more quickly than in our part of the world where we are today.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel like that. A lot of people think like that. Sometimes if they won't admit it, it's one of those things where you have to force it to the front of your mind. And even though we are experiencing it day to day, it happens. It's quite difficult to imagine yourself 20 years into the future where this is actually becoming a life-limiting thing.
Yeah.
Rather than some of the things and the symptoms of climate change that we're seeing here and now. So neurological biases, cognitive biases all get wound up in that. Are you up for trying another experiment?
Yes.
How's your mathematical brain feeling this morning?
God, terrible.
Me too. I hate maths. I've always hated maths. we can lounge in this one together. Okay, so
wait, do I need a pen?
No. Actually, genuinely go with your gut instinct on this one.
I'm feeling the pressure already because you said maths.
So we're going to play a game of Would You Rather. Okay, so we'll do a warm-up. Would you rather walk through a field of duck-sized horses or a field of horse-sized ducks?
duck-sized horses.
Tell me about that.
Definitely. I go wild swimming. The ducks are fierce and they're normal size.
Yeah, they are they're brutal, aren't they, ducks?
I don't think I'd want to meet a duck-sized horse. Hang on, a horse-sized duck. This is like a Wordle game as well. A horse-sized duck. I don't think I would want to meet that, no.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Fair enough.
Beaks will be pretty vicious.
Free choice. Free choice, of course. With all of these, it's free choice. Okay, let's try another one. So, would you rather have a certain win of 250 quid? Or would you gamble on a 25% chance of... Sorry, a 25% chance of winning £1,000, but that comes with a 25% chance of winning nothing?
Whoa, that's a harder one.
I'll say that again. So you've just played the lottery, and the person at the end of the phone says to you, you can either have a certain £250 in your bank account, or you can take a gamble and have a 25% chance of winning £1,000, but that comes with a 75% chance of winning nothing at all.
But 1 in 4, so I'm thinking 25% chance, that's 1 in 4, which is £250. And I'm also thinking this is context dependent, because if I was really skint at the time, I might just go, give me the 250 and I'll put it in a savings account, long term. So that one's harder to answer, because I think it's context dependent.
Okay.
But
Did you have a good
10
feel?
seconds, well, take the risk.
Take the risk. Nice. That probably speaks to a lot of your kind of your background and your position, I guess, as well as a business owner. A lot of your professional life is about taking risks and taking a punt on things. Yeah. Statistically, if you were asking a room of 100 people, most people go with the first thing. They go with the certainty. They'd, okay, I'm gonna walk away with 250 quid. I'd rather do that than have nothing.
What would you say? So I have a theory now. I've got another theory now about this.
Oh, I gamble. Always gamble.
Gamble.
Always. I've watched enough 80s game shows to go, you always gamble.
And what are we geeking out over at our change? I think, I actually think that change is seen quite negatively, but I love it. I mean, I can't tell you how annoying I am at home because I'm constantly changing the furniture around.
I'm also of that. I mean, again, I've watched enough 80s game shows to hear that remark at the end will go, I've come and I've had a brilliant day, and if I'm going home with nothing, I'm going... Because that would be my genuine perspective of, actually, I've come with nothing. I'm okay leaving with nothing.
Yeah.
Might as well quadruple my money.
Yeah.
If there's a chance to. Okay, last one.
Right,
last one. Would you rather have a certain loss of 750 quid or a 25% chance to lose nothing, but that comes with a 75% chance of losing £1,000?
Say that again.
Okay, would you rather have a certain loss of £750 or gamble, and that gamble is 25% chance of losing nothing at all, but a 75% chance of losing £1,000?
I would go with the latter.
Yeah. Do you want to talk me through your thinking process?
It comes back to hygiene versus motivator, that kind of, if the bills are paid and there's security enough, and it's not outrageously risky. I'm somewhere in the middle on a risk profile. So what you've just described to me there, in my context and my world, I'm like, I think I could tolerate that level of risk. It doesn't feel too huge. But change the number, we've got a different story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And interestingly, again, if we were asking a room full of 100 people this, most other people would also go with option B.
Ah, interesting.
So this is an example of kind of what Kahneman calls mental accounting. And it also demonstrates that depending on how a situation is framed, people behave quite differently. Most people behave quite differently. And I think what's interesting about this is, we're coming back to change. My take on change is that whilst lots of people are talking about it, and I understand there is a lot of fear around the world in general at the moment, most people don't fear change. People get married, divorced, they move houses, pumpkin spice latte comes around every year at Starbucks and disappears again. Change happens all the time, and we just deal with it.
Yeah.
What people fear is loss. And sometimes that's all wound together in change, and the top layer looks like change, but actually underneath it, what we're actually dealing with is the perception of loss. And as we can see with that experiment there, people are actually likely to act in a far more risky way if they perceive a situation, if a situation is framed as a loss to them.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. There was the famous saying that people pursue certainty, but the only certainty of life is that life is constantly uncertain. That we live in a world that is constantly changing and evolving. That is a given. And so on one level, you have to embrace change because you're in it. But I think you're right. The biggest thing is our aversion to loss and pain, the pain that comes with loss.
Yeah, we will actively avoid loss. It's another psychological bias. We will almost seek out any opportunity to avoid loss. And that loss could be anything. It could be money in the situation that we described, or it could be something more kind of existential, like identity or ego or face. That we will actively seek out a way to avoid that sense of loss. And I saw it this week. I was working with a team last week who'd been through all kinds of changes. There were teams that were coming together after a merger, and the CEO got up at the front of the day and did what a lot of people are trained to do as leaders. They framed it in a really positive way. Yeah, it's been hard, but look at all these things that we've done, and thank you for everything you've done. And I think they did a pretty good job of kind of spinning it. But actually, as the day went on, what became really clear was that people wanted to talk about all the stuff that had happened to them and process it and have a bit of a rant and event about it. Not necessarily to kind of dwell on the negative, but they needed to talk about the loss. In some cases, it was loss of colleagues who had been made redundant. In some cases, people had had their parts of their job taken away from them. And that was framed as, oh, you've got all this free time. But actually, no, they really cared that, actually, also, you don't care about that thing that I was doing really well and I was really proud of. Other people had pay cuts. So when leaders are working through change, they are often taught to talk about all the good stuff and talk about all the gains and the wins. And that makes sense. You positively frame it. We also have a bias towards positivity and optimism and hope in the future. That's fine. But we very often forget to acknowledge the loss and just put it on the table and talk about it and look at it.
In my systemic constellation training that I've been doing over the last 3 years, one of the most beautiful things that I learned from that is this really simple sentiment of acknowledge the truth of what is, and to have a really non-judgmental stance while you're doing it. Like, the stance of non-judgment is so important. We're not here to analyze, unpick, get into it, ask questions about it. We're just going to acknowledge the truth of what is. Because those things, when they're not acknowledged in organizational systems, circle around in your cultural sea, creating their own little mini sea monsters. They're the things that pop up in the corners of your culture that no one can quite put a finger on, but everybody feels them. It's like they're going to exist, whether you want them to exist or not. And sometimes just acknowledging them takes away all of that kind of energetic power and potency that they have when they're not acknowledged in a system. And I just think that's so liberating. And from a manager's perspective and leader's perspective, like, I think there's a lot of pressure that you have to fix things, or if I have an honest conversation, oh God, what if something comes up that I don't know how to answer or deal with, and so let's just avoid that. And actually, it's really freeing, because if I only have to acknowledge it and we're not here to unpack it, like, that's a beautifully simple thing to have to do process-wise from a manager's perspective.
Yeah, and I think if I was to leave, your leaders and your listeners with that as I'm going to try that. That would be the thing to try. is don't be afraid of opening that box, because I think most leaders, and sweeping generalization here, most men are terrified of opening that particular box because they assume that they have to fix whatever's inside. But it is just about opening it, saying, yeah, this happened, it was really bad, and then listening. Validate
Yeah.
what's going on for the other person. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to come up with solutions. If there aren't solutions needed, very often the other person will have them, which is where the beauty of coaching comes in. But very much is just saying, yeah, this happened. We have, and be honest, we have lost that.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay to do that. You don't need to spin it and put a PR slant on around it, but actually be really honest about what has gone on. People will then be able to move on. I went through a stage of being really obsessed with this Japanese tidying expert called Marie Kondo.
Oh, I love a bit of Marie Kondo.
Marie Kondo and the KonMari, and she has this thing called the KonMari method, right? Which is about kind of tidying your house up and decluttering everything. Yeah. And one of the things I think is really beautiful in her process is that if you are getting rid of something, you have to kind of look at it and like thank it.
Yes, and honour it.
Honour it, absolutely, and just all the things that it means to you.
It's making me think of two things here, like that we're in the psychology of change, murky waters, which is a kind of human dynamics. And I'm thinking about like the importance of empathy as a superpower. So what we're talking about here is being empathetic, to be able to be with someone else when they might be having some difficulties and not feel the need to fix them or sort them out or do anything with them, but to just be alongside them, and trust that they're an adult and if they need something, they can ask for it, to just be with them.
And all of those things, I mean, usually coaching it doesn't face all of that stuff that's going on from your past and from your upbringing, but it can be helpful to interrogate it, can it? Yeah. Like I had a similar thing, you know, I've realized through a lot of the coaching that I've had that I have a real strong bias towards framing things in a really positive light, both for myself and for other people. And that comes from my parents. My parents still do this. I have to kind of have difficult conversations with them relatively often about how they talk to my kids, because it's of a similar kind of conversation. Maybe it's that same generation who were taught to have a stiff upper lip and maybe just let that stuff go, let it go. You know, I for example, my mum had a conversation with my daughter the other day, which was along the lines of, oh, don't cry, you know, be happy all the time. And I had to sort of take her to one side and go, you know, it's all right. It's okay for her to cry. Maybe it's uncomfortable for you to see that.
Yeah.
But we have conversations with her where we let her know it's okay to be sad and talk about her feelings and explain why she's being sad and where these tears are coming from. And then she can move past it. But telling her to not experience that, whilst it makes you feel okay, and whilst ideally, she would be happy a lot of the time, isn't helpful. It isn't helpful. It's not healthy either.
No, and this is making me then think in the workplace context about intergenerational workforces, because like what we're just talking about is like for our parents' generation, they're the post-war babies, where you needed to be grateful. You know, that what was going on for them was you're grateful for what you've got, and if you can aspire for more, brilliant, and you don't complain or moan because you didn't have to go to war and fight. You know, so there is that keep calm and carry on thing as well. Like we will stay positive, the Churchill generation. Yeah. And then I think every generation that comes beyond that, you know, there's loads of research about Gen Z and millennials, and they each have, like, every level of parenting, I think, has a level of evolution of its own. That, you know, we're talking going back to change, and that those patterns then have an impact on those 7-year-olds that become adults in the workplace. And as a leader, it's like another level of awareness you've got to have, isn't it? Like, oh, what's their context that I'm trying to be empathetic to, and knowing that it's a different context for different people, rather than I'm just going to do a one size fits all and treat everybody the same.
Yeah, and their context shapes their meaning that they take from every interaction that they have with you as a leader. That was a game-changing realization for me when I was working in an intergenerational workplace, that actually you have to step outside of your own mental model of how the world works and all the rules that you've been taught and you've inherited from your background and the people that you've kind of looked up to and aspired to, and think about what is their context, what is their meaning that they're taking from anything, not just words but actions. Because understanding that then will allow you to sort of have a think about, well, in the context of change, how are they likely to perceive things as a win or a gain or a loss? because it will have an instrumental effect on how on board they are with what happens next.
Yes. So, Mark, we're just coming towards the end of this session, and we have covered some topics. We have covered some ground. And I'm curious, in terms of like bringing this to a close, if there was one tip that you could leave leaders with on this topic that was like really practical, really actionable, something to keep in their awareness, what's the one tip that you think leaders need to take away from this?
Can I do two?
You can have
One of
two.
them's a cheeky one.
Go on. Which one
So
are you going to do first?
the really practical one is, I would say, have one conversation that you have this week with a colleague, make it 10 times more honest than you would ordinarily have. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of honesty. And when you're having that conversation, look out for those clues and cues that somebody's framing whatever you're talking about as a gain or a loss, and adjust your honesty accordingly.
Nice. I love that. And the other one?
The cheeky one is look into getting a coach. And it's only semi-cheeky because that was instrumental for me when I was a leader.
And me.
And I know it was for you as well. I think one of the great things about coaching is that they allow you to examine your biases in a way that no one else can. I almost have, I've got a glass of water in front of me and I can see it from this angle. You're seeing it from a different angle. But a coach allows you to look at it from every single angle and even question the fact that it's even a glass in the first place.
Yeah.
And that objectivity is so, so valuable. And it allows you to take that into lots of different interactions that you're having with your colleagues. People will notice it as soon as you start reframing and recalibrating how you tend to see the world and all those biases that you bring to each interaction. People start to notice that you are shifting gears.
Yeah, your team notice it. They sense it. I think they sense it first and then they notice it. And then they're very grateful for it. How can listeners reach out and find you? We'll include all the links in the podcast episode, but what's the best way to find you?
The kids say find me on the socials, don't they? Should we go with that? Find me on all the socials, except Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, but I am on all the other socials.
All the other socials.
Pretty much. LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube.
So YouTube and LinkedIn is a priority. And we'll put those links in the link below. Mark, you've been an absolute joy. I love hanging out with you. We never get any work done because there's just so much to geek out over.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.